Yeah, I've been with OPC for about a year. I'm going to talk mainly about post-job offer and return to work, also known as fit for duty testing protocols. And then I'll leave some time at the end to allow you to ask some questions, okay? See me down here? I'll kind of try to roam a little bit. Okay, so today we'll talk a little bit about who we are, who is Occupational Performance Corporation. We'll talk a little bit about the legal and the research behind our testing protocol. We'll talk about who can use the testing and how it can benefit those using it. And then I won't actually demonstrate it today because I'll run out of time, but we do have a website where you can go and actually see the test itself being demonstrated. It's about a 15 to 25 minute video at our website. Also talk about who the test benefits, obviously owners of companies, the employees, safety folks, which I assume a lot of you are safety people, is that right? I have that pretty much, okay. Also talk about work comp, how you can utilize the testing protocol, the report in your work comp process to lower claims, risk management of course, and then treatment teams after an injury when you're getting ready to get somebody back to work, how you know that they're safely ready to return. And then of course legal teams if you ever end up in a court of law. So a little bit about our company. We started in Salina, Kansas, just down the road about 4 hours. Dr. Gary Harbin, still in practice orthopedic surgeon. Actually, we share a building with him. A bunch of the biggest employers in Salina came to him and said, Doc, you do a good job of treating our folks after they've been injured, but we're still having injuries, we're still seeing our work comp go up. Is there any way you can develop a test that will predict an injury when somebody's going to have an injury? So he went about trying to figure that out. What he found was there really isn't any test. There's no way to tell if somebody's going to have a shoulder injury, knee injury, wrist, that type of thing. But what he did find is if you match a person's physical abilities up to the work they're going to be doing, he saw a substantial decrease in injury. So he developed the physical capacity profile test based on the two standard protocols of the day, and I'll talk about those here in a little bit. We continue to not only represent the physical capacity profile testing system in Salina, but we also have a clinic. So we continue to work with some of the large employers, Tony's Pizza, Exide Batteries, Phillips Lighting, Vortex, Valmont, some of those. You've probably heard of some of those. Today we represent about 100 sites in 18 states. Couple reasons we've seen some recent expansion. One is state statutes. They're being adopted. They're a little bit more favorable to companies that want to utilize this test. Would be the first reason. Second, we're working with some of those big companies that may have more than one location. So if we're testing in Salina, Kansas, and they happen to have a sister plant in North Carolina, then we work with a partner in North Carolina to offer the same testing protocol for them there. As you can see though, we did start in the Midwest, so we're very heavy in the Midwest, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, but we are branching out. Some of the companies you recognize, these are all companies that have utilized the PCP test. I want to stop here and just kind of ask three questions, talk about these three questions, kind of get us going down the same path. The first one being if you've ever sat across from somebody you're interviewing, or maybe they're already working for you and you're thinking about transferring them and you've maybe had some doubts or concerns that they really had the strength to be able to do the job that you're going to place them in. That's the first question. Two, have you ever worried about what they might be bringing to your place of employment? Previous injury, condition, something that might pop up down the road that you may end up paying for. And then finally, you're really concerned about maybe somebody got injured and concerned about putting them back in that job and maybe risking further injury or re-injury. So we'll talk kind of about those three questions as we make our way through the presentation. So first, understanding human physical capabilities. We believe at OPC the employee is the most valuable asset. You can do lots of things within the four walls of your place of employment, try to change things to boost morale, but you really need good, strong, physically capable individuals to do the work to make them productive. And obviously, Dr. Harbin was concerned that you only get one body, so you've got to keep it in pretty good shape and for 30, 40 years. So he really wanted to find some type of test that and develop a test that could identify those people on the front side so they could not only be successful for the employer, but successful themselves, maybe away from work, where they could play with their grandkids, play sports on the weekend, or whatever the case may be. So not all physicals give you the same information. I mentioned earlier when Dr. Harbin first started developing the PCP that there were mainly two other protocols out there that were widely recognized and widely utilized. The first being the physician's exam, where you may send a prospective employee to a doctor and they'll take their vitals and may ask them to, bend over, touch their toes, and may do reflex, sit on the end of the table, test all of those types of things, blood pressure, weight, height, all of those statistics, if you will. The other being the job task simulation. And that's where you would go to a place of employment, factory, whatever the case may be, and identify activities or jobs or tasks that that individual may be doing throughout the course of their work, take that back to a clinic, try to recreate that. We talk a lot about, because we do a lot of business in hospitals with nurses, maybe that would be pushing an individual in a wheelchair, maybe up a slight incline. So they would create a test where you put 100 pounds in a wheelchair, have that individual push up the slight incline, come back, all the while somebody's grading them, saying yes, they did complete the task, yes, they used proper range of motion, whatever that case may be. And Dr. Hartman said, those are two good tests, and you get some good information, but when you have somebody injured, what in that information helps me as the doc treat them? How do I know where they were when you hired them? It doesn't give me any baseline information other than maybe weight, those statistics I talked about. So that's when he decided to create a new medical test where he combined both the physician's exam and kind of a job test simulation. So when he created that new medical exam, we still fall under ADA, EEOC, and HIPAA. We must be compliant with all of those, and we are, and I'll talk a little bit of how we are compliant with those. Obviously, you still have to measure a person's abilities to do the essential physical requirements, and we do that. His test and the PCP is based on two national standards, which is different than the other protocols I talked about. One being the American Medical Association guidelines, and two, the Department of Labor's levels of work, and I'll go into those a little bit more as we go on. And of course, we'll talk about the reporting process, how the report is processed in Salina, sent back to both the clinic or hospital, whoever's conducting the test on your behalf, and then somebody in your place of business via a HIPAA secured portal, if you will. And then, of course, we'll talk a little bit about costs and then some of the research at the end. So first thing would be ADA. We're not concerned about disabilities. We're more concerned about impairments. We can test individuals in wheelchairs. We push them up to the machine. We can do just their upper extremities if they've lost the use of their legs. Maybe they only have one arm. We can still test that arm. So we're not focused on disabilities. We're strictly focused on impairments and documenting those impairments. We get asked all the time, have we undergone EEOC audits? And yes, multiple EEOC audits. We had a couple of cases in Salina. One was with a national company that received federal dollars, so they were required every year to go through an audit process. Well, one of those years, the EEOC decided to look at their hiring practices. So they went through the whole gamut of what they did for advertising jobs, where they advertised them, how they selected their individuals, and then of course they came across the physical capacity profile test. So they sent somebody to our offices, went through the test, went back, compiled their report, found to be in compliance. Second case was a smaller HVAC employer in Salina. Had an individual apply for an opening, went all the way through the process, the interview, all of that, sent them down to our office to do the PCP test. They weren't able to meet the demands of the job, so they rescinded the offer. A couple months down the road, job was still open, same individual applied, went through the same process, still was denied, or the job offer was rescinded, still couldn't do to meet the needs of the position. This time he was upset, filed an EEOC claim, same process. They went through, looked at all their hiring practices, including the PCP, found it to still be in compliance. What that means is you don't get a plaque, as any of you have gone through an EEOC audit, you don't get a plaque that says attaboy, attagirl. Basically, you don't have to get out your checkbook, which is even more important. So yes, we have undergone multiple EEOC audits. This is a case you may or may not be familiar with. It goes back a little bit. It was based on one of those job test simulations I was talking about. It was a packing plant. They created a situation where they had 35 pounds of sausage, or just weight in this case, they used 35 pounds. They had to lift it to a height of 65 inches. So they created this test, went about using the test, all well and good. Well, down the road, they had 52 women who had been rejected and were not hired. They felt they were being discriminated against because, again, generalities, women are typically shorter in stature, so they were having to go up on their toes and lift the 35 pounds. So the case basically found that they were being discriminated against. Approximately 40% of the female applicants passed the test, while virtually all of the male applicants did. What they found in addition to that was, among the male candidates, more of them were being injured than the female, which I don't know how we describe how you can explain that, but that was the case. So they were found to be discriminatory, and they've paid out over $3 million to date. So. Talk about impairments, and that's important because we all have impairments. This is a study we did over a 3-month collection period. First one, pinch, 67%. That's nothing more than greater than 10% right or left in just a pinch. Okay? Jump over to shoulder and back, two of the most expensive injuries you can have in the workplace. 61% had shoulder issues and 94% had back issues. And I fall in that 94%. Back surgery 3 years ago, I bring 4% impairment to the workplace. So if I'm injured, moving our 270-pound piece of equipment, my place of business can rest assured that they're only on the hook for anything over and above that 4%. So that's important why we are concerned with documenting impairments, because we all bring them to the workplace. How do you determine an impairment? Well, the American Medical Association, as I said earlier, we utilize their guidelines for identifying and assessing impairments. First being just a decreased range of motion. Okay? Second was that pinch I was referring to, upper extremity bilateral difference of greater than 10%. So that would be in the shoulder, as I said earlier, pinch, wrist, biceps. So that's how we determine for greater than 10%. Or as in my case, have undergone a surgical procedure. Okay. Employing older workers. After the downturn in the economy in 2008, folks are having to work a little bit longer. We're all living longer. So we're having to deal with this in the workplace. Now, the American Medical Association doesn't give you a discount for getting older like they do for your eyes. They expect you to have the same strength at 60 that you had at 20. So they don't discount it. So they're still expecting you to be able to do the work, right? So by 2020, 25% of the workforce will be over 55, and 7% over 65. So we're not getting any younger. We're all getting older. That's going to be an issue, dealing with that as time goes on. So how do you get started? Well, starts with a job description. And I usually ask the group, how many of you think you have a pretty good job description? Do you lay out expected weights to be dealing with? How often, occasionally, constantly, all of those types of things. Everybody think they have a pretty good job description? Well, I find out people think they do, and then we go out and do a job assessment and find that they were way off on the weights or the physical forces that are involved. That's the one side. The other side I deal with a lot of times is they don't have any job description, so we kind of help them get started by identifying those forces at work, and that's kind of the basis for creating a new job description. And we, as I mentioned here, we help determine those. All of our sites, and in the intro, we talked about me being the business development manager. I work with those 100 sites and going out and doing job assessments, and I will help them do them. Actually, I was in Lawrence, Kansas a couple weeks ago doing a big company there. They had a lot of shoulder injuries that required their employees to lift garage doors over their head to put them on a truck. So, and as I said, we use the Department of Labor's levels, which are right here, starting with sedentary and going all the way up to very heavy work. So 1 through 5, and that's the score that the PCP will actually give each position. So that's why it's important that we go out and actually record the forces. We use a force dynamometer to determine those forces in every job, and we'll write up basically a job assessment worksheet for every position. But yeah, if you even look at level 3, 20 to 50 pounds, and I work a lot of times with manufacturing plants, and they'll want to do their most physical positions. Well, if you've got folks working even in an office that are having to deal with bottles of water or files greater than 12 inches in height, you can get to that 20 pounds pretty quickly, and they're as apt to have injuries as anybody else. So keep that in mind. So how does the general population fit into those levels? Well, this shows that we all do a pretty good job of sitting on our backsides. I suppose if you had a back injury or something like that, that 1% that isn't able to do that, that's probably where they fall. But you go up to just that medium level, as I was talking about, you lose 1/3 of the males and 1/2 of the females. And then, of course, as you go down the scale, you lose 90% of the males and all of the females. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? That was 2,500 subjects. That's general across the board. I've got some research that'll show you here in a little bit the same chart that is industry specific, and you'll see those numbers change a little bit. This is probably the most telling study Dr. Harbin did. After he had developed the PCP test and was utilizing it in Salina, we had one company that just had a lot of positions they needed to fill. So they were hiring everybody. And so Dr. Harbin said, that's fine, let me test everybody and let's track them for a period of time. So this group, they all did the PCP test, they were all hired, those that they decided to offer the position. So what he found was in the group that matched the job, meaning they had the physical ability to do the job, that's in the gray. Those that didn't match are in the purple, but they were placed anyway, went to work. Look at the shoulder and back. So the purple number, 28% of them had a shoulder injury and 33% had a back injury or issue of some type. So pretty telling. That makes sense? They all went to work, watched both groups, and tracked their injury rates. So who do you test? We typically deal with new employees, so on that post-job offer or pre-employment type of screening, but you can also test existing employees. That's kind of where the return to work or fit for duty protocol comes in. It's the same test, but it takes a little bit more time because we don't see a lot of issues when people are coming in, they're trying to go to work for the first time. They usually give us 100% effort, don't try to fake a test. Not very many people are, if they've gone to that length and that far in the process, they're not usually going to hold anything back. But some folks get used to sitting on the couch at that 85% of their salary and watching, Jeopardy or whatever, click with the clicker all day. So we built in a couple of ways that we can guard against them trying to work the system, if you will. Each one of our tests are done 3 times, and if there's greater than a 15% variance, we ask them to do it again. The difference about our tests is there's no moving weights. It's all isometric. So they're just exerting force on the actual machine. So they don't get any type of feedback, if you will. They don't know how much they have to lift or exert to lift that weight. It's all in the computer. So, and we use a heart monitor, and we also ask them after every test what their pain level is, 0 to 10. And if that 0 to 10 doesn't match their heart rate, because if somebody says they're in excruciating pain, or 10, you're going to see their heart rate elevate. Well, if it doesn't, we note that in the testing protocol. So we know if somebody is, trying to work the system, if you will. I have some companies that, they may not be hiring, and I'll call on them a lot. In fact, I was calling on one out in western Kansas. They were a electric cooperative and said, well, we have really good insurance. We don't have any turnover, but we do have folks that, are using their insurance. They may have had an old football injury or something from high school or gymnastics, whatever, and they decided to get that shoulder cleaned up. So they were looking for a specific testing protocol that they could apply in those situations when somebody has an elective surgery, not necessarily work comp. They want to run them through and make sure they put them back to work safely without jeopardizing that re-injury. And of course, in a work comp situation, that can be utilized as well. We'll have doctors write that in. It's kind of, I liken it to, if you break your leg and the doc says, well, it looks like you walk all right and you don't have any pain, but I want to do that one more x-ray. Well, the PCP can be utilized in the same way, per policy, obviously. Most employers will do some type of musculoskeletal injury. That's what they use as their determining factor as to whether they require a PCP return to work test. But again, making sure that you apply it across the board uniformly. You can't decide this group's going to have it and this group's not. Or, hey, Chris, you look a little weak today. We're going to have a PCP before you can go back to work. You have to apply it, obviously, across the board. Any questions on any of that? That makes sense on the difference, the PCP and the fit for duty? Again, same machine. There's a picture of the machine, same test, just a few little safeguards that we add in. Back to new employees, though, and I kind of alluded to that. Some places will just do those positions that they've had the most pain, if you will, work comp pain. But if you do that, you have to do it by specific job code or position, or maybe everybody in the warehouse or everybody on the floor. Again, applying it equally to everyone. Okay. Okay, so we'll go through the report or the testing process. This is actually the medical questionnaire. Each subject is asked all of these questions. What we're looking for here, reasons not to test, in addition to collecting some medical history. And I said earlier, this is a post-job offer test, meaning you've already offered them a job contingent on passing usually a drug screen and the physical, right? So we're able to collect this information, put it in a medical file. You can't use it for hiring reasons, but you can keep it and store it in their medical file. It is HIPAA, but again, can't use it for hiring. So we ask them all these questions. All of our test administrators are then prompted to ask them 10 questions again, making sure that it is safe to proceed. The number one reason we don't proceed with the test typically is high blood pressure. Somebody either has forgotten to take their medication or just chose not to take it, feeling pretty good, they quit taking it, or a lot of times they don't even know they have high blood pressure. So we'll test them a couple of times. You may have a little bit of anxiety, so we want to make sure we give them an opportunity to get that blood pressure down. If for any reason they say yes on these, we'll send them out for a medical release, send them to their doc for a medical release before we proceed with testing. So we record all of this information. There's no yeses on here, so we're able to proceed. We go through the test. Like I said, it's 28 different measurements. Some of them are just baseline. We take spirometer, we do a pinch, we do a grip, we do their height, weight, blood pressure, all of those kinds of things. We do a spirometer. They blow twice to get a reading on a spirometer. We record all that, put it in the computer, and then we proceed with the test itself utilizing the machine. And you can kind of see a couple of what they're doing. The top picture, they're doing supination, or wrist, and then quads, lower body testing. So once that's done, we hit submit. It gets sent to Salina to get processed through our patented algorithms, and then right away, or as fast as the internet will allow, you'll get a 3-page report. The first page, and I alluded to this a little bit ago, this is the hiring page. I know it's hard to read, and I do have some sample tests and some brochures I'll send to hand out if anybody would like those after I'm done speaking, and I know it's kind of hard to read, but take my word for it. In the blue box, those are those 5 levels of work per the Department of Labor. Kind of gives a quick little definition for each one. And so if, again, hard to read and I apologize, but this is, they applied for a level 3 position. They attained a level 4.37. So what does that tell you? They can do the job. What it also tells you is if you're having a hard time finding somebody for a level 4 position, you just found them. So they can not only do a 3, but they can do 4, which again is one difference in the job test simulation I was talking about earlier. You would have to create a job for, or a test for every job that you have available. So you'd have to have them go through another test basically. But with our test, because we're looking for that capacity, we want maximum effort, we can record exactly what their total capacity is. That makes sense? So this is what you use for determining whether you're going to hire them or not. Page 2 is the impairment page, and again, this is based on the medical background. So if they had a broken arm in 9th grade, we'll record that. The baseline information from sit-ups to all that stuff gets factored in. And then from the test itself, and I'll give you a little bit of a story, my boss had that rotator cuff injury playing high school or college baseball. Went through this test, didn't disclose that, forgot about it. It was 25 years earlier. Went through the test administrator said, "Hey, what's up with your right shoulder?" He was like, "Oh yeah, I had rotator cuff surgery." Forgotten all about it. Well, it showed that difference, that greater than 10%, his right shoulder versus his left. So we were able to document that impairment. So those are impairments. So that's page 2. Page 3 is all that baseline information that a treatment team or a doc would use in getting that person back to maximum medical improvement, MMI. So we have all of that information that you could utilize in a case where somebody's injured, send them to a treating team or treatment physician, say here's their baseline information, here's where we want to get them back to. Okay, make sense? So that's the report. So how would you utilize that? Here's the case. We had a low back injury, had an initial settlement offer. This is after they've gone through treatment, they've been injured, they've gone through rehab, get to the point where, so what's it going to cost you? This company happened to utilize a PCP. This is the St. Paul Travelers case, an actual situation. Initial offer of $11,500. They were able to look at the PCP report, show that they had an existing impairment, and lowered the offer and saved $5,200 in actual money. Okay. This is Ark City, Kansas. This is talking about their mod rate. This was in the newspaper. I pulled it off the newspaper and included in my presentation. 2005, they had experienced modifier of over 1, which was 1.74. Started doing the PCP along with some other wellness types of approach, and were able to get their mod rate down under 1, and they calculated that they saved just under, 1.2 million in work comp premiums over that 10 years. So again, real money, real savings. This is just a letter from an insured to their insurance company asking about the PCP, whether it would stand up, whether it was a good idea. And they said absolutely, so they proceeded with signing up and implementing the PCP. This again is a situation, Kansas Builders Workers' Compensation Fund. They insure nothing but high mod rate companies, those high risk roofers, construction firms. They have 3 of our systems test all of the companies that they write insurance on are required to have their employees go through this testing protocol. And again, same kind of thing. They showed a savings of just under $8,000 because they were able to tell the existing impairment. They're in Topeka, by the way. This was a case in Kansas City, very heavy work. It's a foundry. And what they were finding was in the first 120 days, they had a lot of turnover in addition to injuries, because again, it was very heavy work. So they had turned to the PCP. You can see when they implemented it, they were having 6 claims, 12 claims, implemented the test, got it down to 1 claim. You can see the drop off there. And they also found that they were getting $8.25 return on every dollar they spent in testing. And they were able to get find employees early, and they were able to get past that high turnover. They were by hiring better individuals to do the work on the front side. This is Ambassador Health right here in Omaha. They also own their own machines, test their own employees, mostly nurses. I mentioned that earlier. Didn't eliminate all their injuries. You can see the drop off from the kind of yellow to the blue. They were still having the needle pricks and things like that, but they were doing away with those high cost injuries, the backs, the shoulders, that kind of thing, by making a good hire on the front side. This is another hospital in St. Paul. They implemented the test in addition to some wellness programs, and were able to get their claims down in number and obviously in expense, from over 100,000 to just over 1,300. I mentioned this earlier. This is that same chart that I showed you earlier, but this is more specific. So what this tells you is that when you're applying to be a truck driver, that's pretty physical work, so you get a little bit higher or more physical applicant, if you will. So you can see that as you get up in the higher numbers, you don't lose as many as they did, as we showed in that general study. Here's nursing, a little bit different, but yeah, comparable to what we were seeing. Law enforcement, again, you're able to still hold on to about 12% of the males and 1% of the females, again, knowing that it's physical work. So we talked to a lot of companies. They say, well, we don't have a big line item in our budget for post-offer testing. What I always say, but you're paying for work comp somewhere. You have a work comp line item somewhere in your budget, whether it's $50,000 or $1 million. If you can save just one of these injuries, you're going to pay for a lot of testing. And we found that the back claim is probably closer to $100,000 now. So not hiring one of those is priceless. And here's just an example. If the test is 150 and you hire 75 people, that's 11,250. If you're getting a return of around $8, you're going to see a return of about $90,000 in either lowered work comp. That doesn't even calculate in retraining or overtime for covering for somebody that's injured. Okay, does that make sense? And again, we test all over the country, so that 150 is probably a higher end of what most of our sites charge. Typically, you see 120 to 175-ish for about a 30-minute test. So just to recap, we are legal compliance with ADA, EOC, and HIPAA. We do rely on a couple of national standards, the Department of Labor and the American Medical Association. We have documentable objective information, which again is one of the reasons we're seeing that a site in Salina also wanting to test somewhere in another state, because it is objective and can be transferred. We get baseline information that can be used in an injury for treatment, getting a person back to maximum medical improvement. We base our job descriptions and the actual tests on the Department of Labor, and we'll work with employers to determine those through job assessments. We increase worker morale and productivity because people have the greater ability to do the job. They're not going to get worn out. You don't see anybody slinking off around the corner when it's time to do something really heavy. They have the ability to do it. And then we'll see as much as $12 return on investment for testing. So I started this early with the 3 questions. If you've ever wondered if you're sitting across from somebody that may not have the strength to do the job you're hiring them for. 2, if they're bringing something to your workplace that you may end up paying for. or 3, concerned about when they're really ready to go back to work. Hopefully I've given you a couple of tools that can help answer those questions and make you feel a little more comfortable about hiring folks. Otherwise, thank you very much. I appreciate it.